In this devotional, I'm going to share with you 3 thoughts from Ruth chapter 4, verses 13 through 22, where I'll ask the question, why is Ruth's story significant? Ruth chapter 4, verses 13 through 22 says, "So Boaz took Ruth, and she became his wife. And he went into her, and the Lord gave her conception, and she bore a son. Then the woman said to Naomi, 'Blessed be the Lord, who has not left you this day without a redeemer, and may his name be renowned in Israel. He shall be to you a restorer of life, and a nourisher of your old age. For your daughter-in-law who loves you, who is more to you than 7 sons, has given birth to him.' Then Naomi took the child and laid him on her lap and became his nurse. And the women of the neighborhood gave him a name, saying, 'A son has been born to Naomi.' They named him Obed, and he was the father of Jesse, the father of David. Now, these are the generations of Perez. Perez fathered Hezron. Hezron fathered Ram. Ram fathered Amminadab. Amminadab fathered Nahshon. Nahshon fathered Salmon. Salmon fathered Boaz. Boaz fathered Obed. Obed fathered Jesse. And Jesse fathered David." The story of Ruth is one that you've probably heard before. You probably are familiar with the idea that Naomi, during a period of famine, follows her husband off to Moab. And while she's there in Moab trying to find a place to live, well, her husband dies, and then her sons die, and she's left with these daughter-in-laws, and she finds out that the famine is over, so she's going to go back to her own land. She's going to go back to Israel. And when she says, "I'm going to go back," and tells her daughters-in-law to go back to their fathers, one of them, Ruth, says, "No, Naomi, I'm going to stay with you, and I'm going to stick with you no matter what." Even though she probably isn't going to get a husband anymore because of this choice, she probably won't ever mother any children, she decides she's going to go with Ruth. And the Lord blesses Ruth and gives her a child. And one of the beautiful things that happens here is that Ruth is in the lineage of David and of Christ because she was faithful to serve her mother-in-law, Naomi. With this in mind, here are 3 thoughts from Ruth chapter 4, verses 13 through 22, answering the question, why is Ruth's story significant? Thought number 1, Moabite. Ruth is a Moabite. She's not an Israelite. She is not a part of the covenant people of God. She just isn't. That's not where her lineage comes from. She's not descended from the patriarchs. This isn't who she is. And because she comes from this different people group, you might think that she doesn't play any part in the Lord's grand plan for bringing about his purposes in the world. But that simply isn't true. In fact, Ruth ends up being within the lineage of David and Christ. And this is an absolutely amazing thing that has taken place, that the Lord would use somebody who was outside of Israel to bring about his ultimate purposes for redemption in the world. It paints a picture of the Lord's love for the Gentiles, when so often in the Old Testament we're focused on Israel. The Lord has concern for the Gentiles as well, and even places them in the lineage of his most significant people. Thought number 2, David. One of the reasons why I wanted to include that section where Perez, the son of Judah and Tamar, go back and watch the video on what's going on with Tamar to find out a little bit more about that. The lineage of Perez all the way down to David has Ruth within it. And essentially what happens is this Moabite woman who is faithful to her mother-in-law ultimately becomes the mother, the grandmother of queens, because she fathers Obed, Obed fathers Jesse, Jesse fathers who? He fathers David. And this is an amazing tale of how God can use people, even from a far-off country, people who aren't a part of his covenant people, and bring them in and engraft them into his glorious plan. That's something that should be encouraging to us, because so very many of us are not a part of the lineage of Abraham. And yet, we can be a part of the covenant community because the Lord takes those who are outside and engrafts them into this beautiful lineage of people who are faithful to God. Thought number 3, Christ. Ultimately, Christ comes into the world through the line of Ruth. Ruth is a part of the many, many people who ultimately have lineage with Christ. And this is a wonderful and beautiful thing to consider, that the Lord would use somebody who most of the folks in her own day would consider cursed because she lost her husband and didn't have any children by them. They would have thought that she was absolutely gone. Think about what it must have been like for her when she came into Israel following Naomi. It had to be difficult, coming from a different culture, coming from a different place, being an outsider, and yet she is brought into this community and she is made a part of it, a significant part. It's a beautiful picture of how the Lord will take those who are outside and bring them in. He will take those who have wandered far afield and bring them back into his family and make them a part of his people. And this is what he has done with all sinners who have confessed Christ's name. Just as Ruth becomes a part of Christ's story, so too can you on the basis of your faith in him and what he has done. This is why Ruth's story is so significant and why your story can be significant as well. These three thoughts come from the assigned reading of Ruth chapters 1 through 4. If you'd like to read through the Bible with me, you can do so by subscribing to this channel, by clicking on the link in the description, or by joining the Facebook group Through the Bible, where we are reading the text of Scripture together.